Always a pleasure. Good to see you. Had a good week?
Terrific week. I noticed you not using my title this morning. Is that because I had two dames on the show?
Quite possibly. But it's also because I bumped into you earlier in the week at a do and you basically blanked me. So
Viewers do not believe this man.
A little bit of an insight there. No, you realised the error of your ways and we had a good chat. Because I hardly ever see you in person. It's always down the line like this, unfortunately. But look, being serious for a second, I think if we'd have chatted last Sunday, we would have been looking ahead to this weekend talking about the spending review that happened on Wednesday. And as a result, you had Rachel Reeves on the show earlier on. You had Mel Stride, the Shadow Chancellor, as well. But it turns out that the story that you talked to them both about was seemingly this about turn on an inquiry commissioned by the government into grooming gangs. This all comes from the conviction of 7 men in Rochdale a couple of days ago related to things they did several years back. And it's prompted a government U-turn. I know it's something you asked Rachel Reeves about first, so let's have a listen to that.
With local inquiries, they don't have the statutory powers, and we need to make sure that people are compelled to give evidence. And that's one of the reasons, because people are not coming forward to give that evidence.
But he, the Home Secretary, Safeguarding Minister, were all pretty clear and specific that they did not think such an inquiry was needed. So they must have been wrong, or they have found out something they did not know before. Which is it?
Well, Louise Casey, when she started this review for the Prime Minister, said herself that she didn't think there was a need for a national inquiry. She has left no stone unturned in her rapid review, and she has now changed her mind.
Trevor, let's set out the context on this. Things change and people's points of view change and decisions follow from that. Has enough changed in the past 5-6 months to prompt what looks to others like another government U-turn on an issue?
Well, I don't think, to be honest, that the Chancellor was pretty frank and relaxed this morning. I don't think I heard anything from her that would convince me that there's something new here. I did, in fact, ask her, is there something that Baroness Casey has discovered, that she has seen, that we did not know before? It's hard to imagine what that could be. Many people, I mean, dozens of journalists, but notably, I should say, Andrew Norfolk at the Times, have been following this story for the best part of a decade and a half. Many of the men who were involved, I mean hundreds when I say many, have actually now been convicted. We have seen the transcript. We have heard the awful, unspeakable things that they did. It is very hard to know what could possibly now come out that would justify anybody saying, there's stuff that we didn't know in January that we now do know. But we gather from our colleague Amanda Ekas that there will be, that the Casey review is likely to see the light of day tomorrow. So we'll see if there is anything new. If there isn't, I think you're completely right. This will add to the narrative that this is a government which essentially does U-turns, but the specific problem for them is not just that they do U-turns, but they do U-turns on things that they insist for months and months and months that they will not do. We know that from the winter fuel allowance issue. And if you reach a bit further back in your memory, I mean, we didn't know what a woman was until the Supreme Court ruled and when we decided that a woman was a female human being. So I think there's some thinking to be done at the top of government, not about the substance, but about how they explain themselves to the public.
You mentioned Andrew Norfolk there, the Times journalist, who sadly passed away last month, didn't he? And hasn't lived to see things progress in this way, but certainly did a lot of work, as you mentioned there, in this area. Someone else, Trevor, who has done a lot of work in this area is Alexis Jay. She spent years of her life looking into this issue. Yes, it wasn't a full national public inquiry, as the government is talking about now, but she made something like 20 recommendations, and I don't think the government has taken them all on board or said when they will do that. So people will wonder, you have an inquiry, fine, but surely it's the outcomes and the outputs of that inquiry that matter.
Well, there are 2 points here. First of all, this current government says that the problem lay with the previous government, which didn't implement the recommendations from Alexis J. You're quite right. There is yet not much evidence that things are going to be done. I mean, there's going to be some legislation about mandatory reporting and so on, which we will see later in the year, I think. But I think that there's a deeper point about this specific issue. The argument that was made was that Alexis J's huge report took many years to complete. In fact, there were 2 or 3 chairs before her who started the inquiry. So this is going back many years. And the argument that is made is that Alexis J's report did look into this. I think those who are involved and who have followed this story for many years, and I include myself here, would say that the thing that Alexis J's report did not do, couldn't do, because for procedural and other reasons, was to deal with 2 specific characteristics of this particular kind of abuse. First of all, the disproportionate number of men from a particular ethnicity, Pakistani and particular Afghan Muslims in certain towns, that the Alexis J's inquiry didn't really address that. Secondly, that there were some local inquiries, but actually they didn't have powers. And the truth is, some of those local inquiries were run by people who, to some extent, should have been inquired into themselves because they were involved with local authorities that didn't do the job that they were supposed to do. But I think the other point, which is very particular about this kind of abuse, and I've been doing reporting on child abuse now for the best part of 40 years. One of the first big documentaries I did at the end of the 80s was about this. In most cases, nobody knows. The abusers, the first thing they'd say to a child is, do not tell anybody. And if you do tell anybody, you will be taken away, your mum will be put in prison, and so on. In this particular kind of grooming, the difference was that many, many hundreds of people knew what was going on. And that's the difference.
We have heard from some victims. Jason Farrell, our colleague, has spoken to some who welcome this call for an inquiry. It's also something you mentioned to the Shadow Chancellor, Mel Stride, earlier on. Here's your question and answer with him.
Are you glad to see the establishment of a national inquiry into grooming gangs?
Yes, but it's taken too long. The Prime Minister dithered on this. In fact, he became very defensive about not having this proper statutory national inquiry. He accused us, for example, and Chris Philp and Kemi Badenoch and others in my party made the running on this. He accused us of jumping on a right-wing bandwagon. Lucy Powell said it was dog whistle politics.
What he said is that you had many years to do this, and you did.
We did a lot.
Is that a justifiable response from Mel Stride there? Because isn't he right to point out that they were accused of jumping on a bandwagon, and that bandwagon is now underway?
Yes, I think one of the more distasteful aspects of the politics around this is that some of those who try to raise the issue were accused of talking nonsense, of spreading misinformation, and though this word wasn't used by ministers, essentially being racist. And of course, behind all of this, there is now a government-backed attempt to establish a definition of Islamophobia. And there are many people who believe that talking about this particular issue should be regarded as an example of Islamophobia. And it's really striking, Matt, that amongst the many weighty issues that we have to deal with today, you know, what is happening in Iran and Israel and the spending review. And by the way, I should give a shout out to our Sunday morning team at Sky who spun on a coin to enable us to cover the Iran-Israel issue and so on. This issue has cut through to the public. And that, of course, is, I suspect, why it's become such a troublesome one for the government, and one in which the Prime Minister, in the midst of his trip to the G7, felt he had to say on a Saturday night, we're going to have this national inquiry and execute this enormous U-turn. I don't think the political ramifications of this are in any way over.
Trevor, let's just finish off by talking about this week's spending review, because that was precisely the reason why Rachel Reeves and Mel Stride are doing the rounds again today. How was Rachel Reeves with you when talking about it? Confident, satisfied with the outcome? Because Mel Stride, I think, called her in the Commons a tinfoil chancellor rather than an iron chancellor, didn't he?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of language flying around on this. I think that Rachel Reeves, as ever, puts a good front on it. But it's hard to imagine she wouldn't be a bit cheesed off that, number one, she has had to execute this mother of all U-turns on the winter fuel allowance, and that, in a sense, though this was a responsibility for the whole of the government, the whole cabinet agreed that last July, presumably, but she's taken, if you like, the political hit for it. And secondly, I think that the problem that she now faces is one of, is the government which says, we're going to do this, or we take this position, but if a lot of people shout loudly enough and enough backbenchers complain, they seem to be ready to back off. And this, to political observers, seems especially odd for this government, with a huge majority, one that we haven't seen the like of since the 1990s, and with 4 years to go, that, if there's a lot of shouting on the backbenches, they suddenly decide that whatever they had decided last month is wrong. So I think from her point of view, though, she comes in, I think, my view, gives a really sterling performance. This can't be a comfortable position to be in.
I'll be talking to one of those backbenchers who's been vocal on the grooming gangs issue, Paul Waugh, MP, later in the hour. But Trevor, if I can finish off by executing my own U-turn, given that we've had the King's birthday honours this weekend, Sir Trevor Phillips, thank you very much indeed. I know you like me using the title. I know you like it, really. Come on.
Thank you, Lord Barbet, at some point.
Yeah, I think that'll be a long time coming. You'll be waiting a very long time for that. Trevor, good stuff. Thank you very much indeed.
Bye-bye.